Hi, I am Jan Jensen and way excited to be here in the iWork studio. We are here at the KC Art Lounge. Uh, it's going to be a fun time. We're going to talk about art and artists and their favorite cocktails and just kind of have a fun time introducing Kansas City to local artists. I'm way excited that Kevin Callahan is our first artist. Let's just go right to your name, Kevin.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jan. Kevin is Gaelic for Kevin, and I have a 100% Irish background, and my mother thought that would be a very good idea. And for those who think it's totally odd, I grew up in a small town in Iowa where in the surrounding area I knew at least four other Kevins.
Really?
Really.
I did not know that. I thought you were the just probably had to spend your whole life
I
explaining your
have
name.
spent my entire life or battling grade school teachers.
Oh, I bet.
I had to pout and throw tantrums, but I was
I
pretty good at
can't.
that.
I can't even imagine
So
you.
yes, it's Kevin.
Can't
That's
imagine you
the
throwing it.
long E.
I know. I noticed. I think you've started doing that more recently,
Yes,
perhaps.
I should have done that years and years ago as an artist. I could have signed just KE instead of my entire name and saved a lot of time and effort. But I didn't start it till the last 10 years, I guess. So,
Smart,
yeah.
smart guy. Um, well, speaking about that small town in Iowa, tell us about 6-year-old Kevin.
Oh, 6 year old Kevin. I write about that a lot because the first farm we grew up on, I went to a one room country school a mile and a half up the road where we typically walked uphill both ways
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
through the wind and the
Yeah.
snow.
Mm-hmm.
The whole, but it's true we did, and it sounds very quaint, which it is. Almost all those in Iowa, they were gone by 1960. They were gone. So when I was in second grade, they moved all the country schools into town, and the 7 year old me didn't like it very much. I liked that freedom of the country lifestyle and wandering the fields before and after school, and I didn't do very well in
Interesting.
in school. No, I wouldn't say I rebelled. I just kind of shriveled up at school until I was in high school, and then I picked up the pace and I don't know, got smarter, I guess.
That's such an interesting statement. I kind of shriveled up. I have a colleague and I who've been discussing this whole idea of school and what school does to artists and musicians sometimes. And talk more about that shriveling up thing.
Oh well, I didn't take the science and math very well. Not that I didn't necessarily understand it; it just didn't have any interest for me. And art was not a big thing in rural Iowa back then until I got to high school and could actually get into art classes. But I was always drawing. I was painting at an early age. I always liked this story because my aunt, I only had one aunt that I knew very closely,
Mm-hmm.
and she sort of understood that I was into art. I don't know why she did, but she gave me a paint by number set for Christmas one year, which I thought was really cool. There was oil back then; they didn't use acrylics; it
Right.
was oil, and it was a bounding deer, which of course fit my country
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle. It was great, and I started painting all these little, and I thought, this sucks. I really hate this. So I threw the canvas away. I went to town to the cobblers. We had a cobbler in town, and I would buy little pieces of canvas for like 15 cents. And I would go home and I'd make my own brushes out of matchsticks and brushes.
Oh my
And I just painted my own
golly.
paintings. And I kept that up. Then a few years later, there was a man in town who went to art school and came back to be a painter. And that's pretty tough in a small town like that.
Oh my
But he
goodness.
took me under his wing, and I used to pose for him when I was 12. And then he would say, "Okay, let's have you do a painting." And he'd say, "Here's how you do a sky," and that was just sort of my launch, I guess.
So you knew pretty early on that
Yes.
you
Oh, yes. When I was 4 years old, and this is not unusual for a lot of artists. It sounds unusual if you're telling people about it, but
right.
if you go on art forums, almost every artist got into it when they were 4 or 5 years old. I used to lay down and take out the Sunday papers and try to redraw the cartoons.
Oh my
And then I
gosh.
had some kind of mini fame in our tiny high school because I did the draw the pirate thing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh
when
yeah.
the Minneapolis School of Art, I was accepted in there and did a course there, and that's so far back in my memories. I can hardly remember doing that, but people will remind me every once in a while that I drew the pirate. So
Oh my golly.
I don't think it took a special talent to do that, however.
Isn't it interesting that one would think that you have to be in a city or you have to be around art institutes or something in order to feed that talent, but you are
Yeah,
proving that's not.
it's more of a passion, but you don't necessarily think that's what you're going to do because everyone you know, it's a fairly narrow thing in a small town. People
Mm-hmm.
are farmers, where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple of bankers.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of lawyers or one lawyer. There was gas stations. There were a guy who had a clothing shop, a couple of doctors, but it's pretty narrow. So there's really not room for a whole lot of expansion there. And people do go to art school, but then they don't generally come home. I didn't know anybody who had been to art school except Gary, the older man that I knew,
Yeah.
who was a friend of my dad's. But I didn't know anybody that had done anything like that. So it was a revelation, and my folks, it was a head scratcher for my parents
Oh, I'm
because
sure.
they don't know what that means,
Right.
And I was the only one in my family to go to a 4-year college and get a degree, so
And then
it
you
was
did
kind of
it.
special.
It was special, but
Yeah,
on the other hand, it was art.
it was art, right? I couldn't really explain to my mother and father what I did. Particularly, my mother was very close to my mother. So when I started working for um, Better Homes and Gardens, and I could bring home magazines that I designed, things that I did, things work that I had done for Better Homes and Gardens. She could keep that on her coffee table. So I don't know what he does, but I know who he works for. That was the running joke.
Love it. So let's talk about art in its place in society, art and artists. So how do you feel that your art fits into culture, to the,
My art specifically, I'll get back to, but
okay,
I do have a saying. Occasionally, we get to debating among intellectual
sure,
friends, non-artists, artists, whatever, and my particular saying is that everything is art and nothing is art. So that refers to a lot of people who sort of bring down abstract art or a knowable art, if you will. But everything we do is art. I mean, you can't design a microphone, a jacket, an earring, a car, a phone, anything. Everything contains art. The marketing packages. No one has done that in the last 30 years or so better than Apple, who
sure, yeah,
employ an army of designers to say what color should it be, what shape should it be, how should it feel when you hold it in your hand, everything down to the buttons and the sound. And so art, you can't escape art, although we don't think of something like that as hanging in our museums. However, pardon me, you say you sniffle. My eyes run when I'm sitting still
okay,
long enough, so
we'll
I'll
sniff
I'll
and
keep doing
figure
that.
out,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, audience, but
it's
that'll
all,
be part of the deal.
it's all good,
Um, Certainly not the first to notice it. I mean, I think you can go back to the Dada
right,
but Andy Warhol was the genius. You may knock Andy for not being a great artist personally himself, but he noticed this. He noticed that art was a Brillo box, art was a soup can, art
oh, sure,
was
yeah,
picking up an icon like Elizabeth Taylor or Elvis and putting that silk screen that on there, and he brought it to a height that certainly made him wealthy and famous. So yeah, and my art, how does my art feel in? Well, my art kind of runs the gamut. In the last 20 plus years, I have concentrated. I do a lot of other stuff around the edges. All artists do,
right,
but I've concentrated on three main themes. The first is blues paintings. I call them blues paintings. That's not semantically correct. But I've been lucky to travel the country and the world, and I see people out playing for nickels and dimes,
right,
busking, and so I will take their picture. In their case, I always donate a little extra to the cup, and hope they just keep playing. But sometimes they stop, they smile, they strike a pose. So okay, there you have it. But I have these blues paintings from New York and San Francisco and San Diego
Yeah, they're way cool.
and Berlin and London and all over the place, and it's just fun to do those. Um, the other thing that I've done is my Girl Woman Girl series, and it's very difficult for me to explain because it is in no way sexualized at all. But I notice, and it's not just young women, but for the most part, I'd say primarily they fall between the ages of 15 and 40.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done older women, I've done young girls where I catch them in unguarded moments. I take their photograph. They don't know it most of the time. Some of them are people known to me. Many of them are total strangers in another country somewhere. I do a painting of them, and they are pensive. They are happy. They are in conversation. They have on fashion, the red hats and curly things around,
Right.
and that's to me that's just an inspiring way to catch that and do that. And I can't even. I've lost track of all the girl, woman, girl paintings I've done in the last 20 years. I don't know, 40, 50. I couldn't really say. Uh, I also set out to paint a lot of nostalgia. I grew up on the farm, second farm, old farm. It was over 100 years old when we moved there, and the buildings were becoming decrepit. There was a one room schoolhouse on the edge of the property. As a young adult, newly married, right out of college, you knew this was going away.
Yeah.
It was not going in 10 years. None of that would be there. So I took pictures, did paintings, and captured a lot of that, which included my father and things like that. So yeah, um, so I continue that in a different kind of way by doing a lot of very small paintings of barns in
Mm-hmm.
Missouri
Mm-hmm.
and Iowa, which have also been popular, I would say. I think everybody likes a barn. I don't know why that is.
I
I
don't
like a
either.
barn.
Yeah.
I like a barn too, but it's pretty. And somebody said you got to paint red barn because nobody wants to buy anything except a red barn, which I think is about eighty
Is that
percent
true?
true. Yeah, about 80%. Yeah.
Well, I have been posting and will continue to post some photos or images of Kevin's work, and so you can get a taste of these three different things that he does. They're amazing. They do really catch you, and you do, and your description of them being pensive is really true. You kind of wonder what it is they're thinking about, and a lot of times you don't even show their whole face. It's just a
No.
side view or the boots, the green boots and the yellow
Girl in green
shoes.
boots,
Yeah,
right?
we'll be sure and put those out so
One
you
of
can
my
see
art
them.
friends, who's a former professor in Chicago, and she's a really quite well known artist. It's always flattering when you run into people at that level who like your work.
Right.
And I did a painting of a girl, and she was looking away, and the hair's down in front of her face. She said, "Only you would do a portrait of somebody where you can't see their face." I think
But
that's probably true.
I like that though because sometimes people would say, "Why would I want a portrait of somebody that I don't know on my wall?"
Right.
And so these are really fun because anybody could put those on their wall, and there's a story that's in your head, or
Right,
there's a story
right.
that
They
you
all
make
have a
up.
story with them, each
Love
one.
that.
And the fourth, and I don't know how I managed to skip over this one,
Yeah, I hope
are
this.
the self portraits.
Yes.
I belong to Fine Art America, and I have since 2007. It's a site where you can put your work up there, and they don't sell the originals, but they sell prints, and they make a lot of money doing that. And it's been a great place to showcase your work because you can put as much up there as you want
Right.
for a small fee. And a number of years ago, one of the fellow artists came on, and he was joshing with me. He was having fun, right? And he said, "Why don't we do a portrait? Somebody paint Kevin." And all of a sudden, there's like dozens of paintings coming on. There's
Yeah.
some they're really good and they're just lots of fun. And I thought I want to get in on this, so I looked online and at the time I had this handlebar mustache
Mm-hmm.
and this little beard, and I said I look like Rembrandt van Rijn, so I painted myself as Rembrandt, and that just sort of started the ball rolling. Where I painted myself as about currently about 13, 12 or 13 different people out there, and three of those portraits have been sold. Michelangelo and Winston Churchill and Rembrandt were the first. So
What do you know?
it's yeah. They're fun.
And then I think we used Scream. I think is
Screams on the
on
yeah. Hmm.
the event thing, and that is yeah,
Yeah,
really
it's
fun.
always fun to try to decide how to pose yourself. Michelangelo was fun because I wanted him, painting the Sistine Chapel or
Yeah.
something along those lines. So I have a bench in my gallery area that I cleared off and a T-shirt, and I wrapped my head in a rag, and I would get the camera set up and I would lay down and hold the paintbrush up, and I had to do this about 12 times right before I finally got to the point where it looked like a workable shot. But it was fun.
So you can see why it's fun to know Kevin and hang out with him. He never a dull moment. So let's talk about the other things you do. You started out, I know, as a graphic designer, and then did that for years. That was your
Still
career.
do, still do.
Still do that,
Hmm.
and then but also it's also done this fine art kind of thing. But you are also, I feel like I should break into that song, a poet, as da, 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 da. So
Yeah.
so many creative talents. Do you think that's typical of artists, or are you just
Yes, I
one
do.
way?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. I don't think all artists do, but many artists they well, when it came to I got into writing poetry. I've always written poetry to a certain extent, but very small and very quiet
Mm-hmm.
for years. And then in the last few years, it's kind of broken out where I started writing longer poems and speaking in public and got published. And then you start seeing other poets out there, and they're engineers. They're some of them are rocket scientists. I mean, there are nurses and doctors. There's almost nobody out there who doesn't try to pen a poem, and many of them are really really good. So it's not unusual, I don't think.
Interesting.
The creative urge, I think, is in so many of us. What I I find um, I push on people a lot is I'll meet somebody and they'll tell me their story, and I'll say old, young, whatever, and I'll say, well, have you written that down? No, they know. I said, well, you need to write that down. You need to write that for your children. You need to write that for future generations. Just tell the story because, I tell a lot of stories that are based on small incidents from my childhood that no one would remember. The old engineer who always drank 2 glasses of nickel beer. I mean, those, who would remember that if you didn't write it
That's
down?
true. That's true. Our my husband's parents did write the stories about their family, and it's great. And this morning I was reading. In fact, it was on the iWorks little flyer thing that comes out, that ways that you can calm yourself or make yourself a better person. And one of the things that they mentioned was having a journal, writing things down,
Right, right.
whether anybody ever reads them or not. Just this idea of putting your thoughts down.
A number of years ago, my wife's grandparents came from diverse situations. He was Norwegian who settled in central Iowa. I think he was a baby when he came. He either came over. We've never really pinned that down if he came from Norway with his parents or he was just
Right.
born when he got here. But he spoke Norwegian, and in his younger life, he was a farmer, school teacher, and at the age of 30 became a doctor and got married that year and practiced and was married for over 50 years. So he was a fascinating man. Her family came from a small town in west central Nebraska, and she also was a highly educated woman, but they were part of the Daughters of the Revolution. They could trace their roots back on the
Yeah.
English side, and it just she wrote down some of the family history for my wife, and she just thought that was the most fascinating thing to have that in her hand.
Right.
So we need to write these things down.
And then save them somewhere where people will. A problem now is that we save things. I'm thinking of photos that we have
Yes,
on our phone, and who's going to find our phone and be able to see those?
I have a painting that's been very popular. It's two little girls. It's called the Red Ribbon,
Ah,
and
love it.
shows. I think that if I remember right, it's a 1957 brand new Ford uh, automobile, and these two little twin girls identically dressed, and one of them's clutching a red ribbon. And the reason I painted that was I was going through a box of old photographs, and these mother and father were friends of my grandparents in the 50s. I have no idea who they were. I don't any
Oh my
idea who these
gosh.
little girls were. And it was a tiny little photograph in black and white about that big. And I expanded it into a large, and I had to invent it. And as I got really closer to having the painting done, I realized she's not holding a red ribbon. She's holding the leash of a little dog that's hiding
Really?
under the car. But by then I thought, no, I just want the ribbon in there. So, but it's kind of spooky. It's a little Jack Nicholson.
You know what? That
Yeah, it has that connotation to
yes,
it.
that painting is right now in my office, and I love looking at it. But I see, I so the dog isn't there. I was worried for a
No,
minute that I'd
the
missed the
dog's not
dog.
actually in there. No.
But for me, I think it's fun. It looks like to me a big billboard, a night like a 1950s
Yes, yeah,
billboard.
yeah.
It's
It
a
has that.
great,
It also has that
yeah.
connotation,
So
right?
I'll be sure and post that so y'all can get a
There's
look at that.
a artist, and his name escapes me right now, but he was from Nebraska, and he did these great paintings of gas stations, the modern
Oh
gas
yeah.
stations with the straight lines and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and it kind of has that feel to it too. It wasn't really necessarily intentional for me, but that's the fun thing about art is you'll head down a path and you'll think, well, I'm going to do this, and you map out the painting, and then you sit there and you think about it for a while and say, okay, if I just paint an apple in the middle of the page, it will be a nice apple, but it'll just look like an apple, right? So what else are you going to do that takes it out of the realm of just reproducing an apple? And sometimes you're successful, hopefully, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you're not. But I think when you get a really good painting, it goes further than that. It's not just two little girls standing in front of
Right.
a car. There's a lot more atmosphere and tension going on. And some of these things you don't even realize until after you've done them. You can poll a whole bunch of painters who are really good at what they do, and they will tell you. They'll go back and look at paintings like, I have no remembrance of making that brushstroke. I have no idea how I did that. I'm not sure I could do it again, but I sure like what I did.
Huh.
And that's not at all unusual. It's not a formula like baking or something.
Yeah.
It's a lot more freeform than that.
So, in addition to being an artist and a poet and a writer and a publisher and an illustrator, you also are a collector. You collect art. And
Yes, we do.
yeah, so talk about that and thinking in terms of giving people who might be watching this cues or clues. How do you become a collector? What's good? What's bad? There, I mean,
Uh,
my
yeah,
my contention is that the reason a lot of people don't have fine art on their walls of is that they don't know they think they don't know enough to go buy it, that they will choose something, they'll spend money for something that isn't maybe good. Let's
yeah,
allay their
that's you're
fears.
you're absolutely right
Yeah.
on all of that. I'm not sure I can give great advice on collecting art, but we do have some pieces that are by very well known artists, and they are virtually not all. They're virtually all what are called stone lithographs, which was a great reproduction. So, well, it's still out there, but in printmaking you had etchings and you had stone lithographs and a few other ways to get there. Woodcuts,
Right.
and that was really a way to reproduce something. So back in the 1800s, later 1800s, a lot of artists, very famous artists like Matisse, for example, they would do sketches and drawings. He was great to work with his model, and he would then transfer them. He would make them into stone lithographs. In this case, they're black and white lines, but he could take that same painting that he did and do a stone litho of it, and he could sell 1,000 copies of that litho. The painting might sell for several hundred, if not thousands, of francs. The stone litho copy might sell for 30 or 40 or 100 francs somewhere around the world. They would go to his dealers in New York and in Belgium and all over the world, but he could do that 1,000 times, and he brought in whatever profit was on that. and so it was not dissimilar than if I did a painting and put it on Fine
Right.
Art America, and
Right.
somebody buys a modern lithographic print of it and frames it, and you can put it on canvas or whatever. Um, those have a value because they are from the artist. They're
Right.
authenticated, but they're not. See, most people would, when I have this conversation with people in my home, they say, "Oh, well, my God, that must cost a lot of money." Well, they're not that expensive. They're a little expensive. And if you're buying it for investment, you're probably doing the wrong thing because you're paying retail and the frame is kind of valuable too.
Right.
So if I had to sell them today, I probably couldn't sell them for what I bought them for. But
Right.
I enjoy them.
Isn't that the
You
truth?
can come into my home and see a Kandinsky, you can see a Matisse, you can see a Miro, you can see some bronzes and some glass work, and it just makes our home lovely to live
Right.
in. And it's not about the money.
Oh, so many things pop into my head when you say that. It makes your home lovely to live in. And I think, boy, we're all becoming aware right now of how important it is that our homes be someplace that we love to be. So, to someone who says, "Well, I don't buy fine art because what if I don't know if it's good or I don't," I just say if you like it,
Oh yeah, most
go with it.
the majority of the people who will buy a new work of art, like a painting, to go in their home, will buy from a student artist, a family friend who paints. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely great. Please go out and support them and
Right.
buy, but don't be afraid to go out and spend a little money and buy and by a little money. Paintings paintings are funny animals because people would spend thousands of dollars on a machine that they can you know use to go across the surface of the world. But if you tell them that you want to spend $2,500 on a painting, they about have a heart attack. They think it better be a good investment and it better be worth something more when I'm
Right.
dead, which probably is not going to be the
No,
case.
not at
It's
all.
not likely.
Not at all.
If you buy the auction for the Nerman was just this weekend, and there was a donated piece in there by a lady who's a famous artist. She's in a number of museum collections. She's what you would term an important artist. So her work went for something like $50,000. This is discerning stuff, and collectors who
Right.
can afford it. That's great. But you could still go to an auction like that and pick up something for $300 or $400 that if I were selling it, I'd want to sell it for 1,000. So
Right.
I mean, it's out there if you are serious about it.
Right.
But I don't think visually Americans are not ignorant, but they're not conditioned. If you're in the pandemic now, you're probably watching Netflix or Hulu or one of
Right.
those. And we love Netflix, so we watch a lot of British detective stuff or British whatever from around the world. I don't care what kind of home the detectives go into in Britain, whether it's a poor, impoverished family or a really wealthy family. They all have great art on the wall in their series. You don't see that very much in the United States. They go into somebody's house and they don't have any art on the wall. Even people who are supposedly wealthy or they're over decorated,
Right.
perhaps. But so a lot of that is how we're educated by the media that we see all the time.
Interesting, because I was going to go, of course, when you say educated, right to are we not doing a good job in school? Having been a school teacher I taught music for years, so you kind of go back to that. Are we not doing a good enough job of teaching it? But boy, the power of media is amazing.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's everything.
it's probably more than
I'm an observer. I mean, I think that's part of being an artist is somebody who observes weird things going on. So my family gets tired of me, hearing about it all the time. But I can remember, for example, before Obama was elected, they were running a TV series with a black president. That was unheard of. We
mm-hmm,
thought that was
mm-hmm.
that was
Yep,
weird,
hadn't happened.
and yeah, it hadn't happened yet. And Obama was elected, and all of a sudden you had TV commercials with a African American mother and two little daughters on TV on commercials. I
Mm-hmm.
mean that doesn't happen by accident. Somebody just didn't wake up one day and go, "Oh, that's a great model, and let's put two little girls with her." There was design behind all of that.
Yeah.
So we need people talk about being brainwashed. I don't call it brainwashed, but remember, everything we see is up there for a reason. The haircut on the model, the type of the model, the words in the commercial, it's all there. Just like Andy Warhol was telling us so many years ago.
Yep. Yep. Well, I also think it's interesting that people who just need to trust their taste to an extent. So I did a study earlier a few years ago about personality and energy and how each of us has in our brain lines, colors, shapes that appeal to us and that maybe don't appeal to another person. So I think that if you are going out to look for art or choosing something, just to to go with what you like. I look at things in my collection at home, and there's a color scheme, and it's not because I have any thoughts about, oh, I need to have the art match. I need to have the colors match.
Got to match your couch.
Yeah, no, but not doesn't match my couch. But I do find that certain combinations of colors are pleasing to me, and I am drawn to those. And so
No, I
there
think
you go.
your idea that you should trust your own taste is perfect. I don't imagine a lot of people I know having a totally abstract piece hanging above their somewhere in their home with
Right,
you know I would say above the fireplace, but that's not right either. But I just
because the television is
I
there.
think you should find the thing you like, and if nature is your thing, there's tons of great photography out there. There are tons of good
Oh,
paintings.
beautiful. Yep.
I mean, whatever it is, and so somebody else thinks it's not sophisticated enough. Who cares? Are you going to be invited to all their dinner parties? Because I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Not at all.
And it's interesting that we consistently find something that seems intellectually beyond everybody's reach or most people's reach.
Right.
Then we describe it, so we tell them how important it is as artists. But then at some point in time, we come back and we find these untutored artists
Right.
who make things out of little pieces of wood and metal and all that, and have just made things because they want to make things, not because they think they're being important or they're going to be in a museum or they're going to sell them for
Right.
big bucks. And we discover them, and then we elevate them. So it's always a push pull in the art world.
Oh, and you just opened a whole new topic. We'll have to do this another time
That's great. It's been
because
so much
it
fun.
is fun and it's just fun. Now, is there anything else that pops into your head that we should mention about art in Kansas City or um, about your place in art, or did we?
I would like to. People do mention this, and I would definitely continue that conversation. That Kansas City is one of the most art or creative friendly places I've lived, and I've lived
Good.
all across the country on both coasts and in the middle. And there's a lot of art going on. There's a lot of people being embraced out there. But Kansas City pretty much has open arms for people who are starting out, who are very successful, and a lot of us who are somewhere in between. So
I
kudos
know.
to Kansas
It
City.
is great. It is great. So we're at the Casey Art Lounge, and we said we were going to talk just 2 minutes about cocktails or mocktails, or and you're you go to bourbon.
We are well. I do. I'm bourbon or tequila, straight
Yeah.
tequila on the rocks. But we're very fortunate in our wonderful home to have. We didn't build it. We bought it. But there's a full size bar downstairs. It looks like you came into a hotel
It
lounge,
does. It's
and
lovely.
so my older son has his bartending license, and he's always mixing up some different kind of cocktail, which I won't touch, but his mother loves to drink.
Oh,
So
and it is such fun. And
yeah,
we have done an event at your home that was way fun.
we have, yes,
And
I've
we're looking forward to the pandemic being over so that we can do that kind of thing
always
again.
fun.
And you are one who enjoys having people come to your studio, which I think is the case of a lot of artists in Kansas City. So that's one of the things we want to do in the future is to first of all introduce you to these great people, and then to because once you know them, you their art makes so much sense. It's just way fun, and then to have the opportunity to visit their studios. So thanks for hanging around with us at and look forward to seeing you again. The next time we're going to be talking to Michael Coleman, who is another amazing
You'll
Kansas
like
City.
Mike.
You will love Mike and the work that he does. So thanks. We'll see you next time.